All right, let's dive right into what's happening, because the stories we're seeing are more than just headlines. They're signs of bigger shifts at play, and we'll start in the United States, where a story that seems personal, almost trivial, is blowing up and telling us a lot about where we are right now. If you're new here, I'm Andrew Meet Rich. I used to work inside a state-run media outlet, saw how stories were twisted to fit the narrative, and I walked away. Now I'm independent, I speak freely, and I tell you what really matters. And if you believe in that mission, if you want to support a voice that isn't controlled by a corporate or state agenda, then hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and maybe even consider becoming a sponsor. It's your support that keeps this light on. So, a story is making the rounds in America, sparking furious debate, not just on social media, but in the mainstream press. It's about a second wedding anniversary that ended in complete disaster. A woman shared her story, explaining how for weeks she'd been saving up to buy her husband the smartwatch he'd been wanting. She planned the perfect evening, right? The whole 9 yards. Special packaging, candles, his favorite meal. Everything was set up to be a perfect, heartfelt celebration. And what did she get in return? Her husband handed her a $100 gift card to his favorite video game store. And get this, he tells her, we can both use it. You love watching me play. Can you believe the nerve? When she, completely understandably, showed her disappointment, he called her ungrateful. The evening ended with her leaving to stay with her sister. Now, why is a story like this getting so much attention? Because it strikes a nerve, it speaks to a deeper disconnect that a lot of people are feeling. It's a small story, but it's a big deal. And while that's what people are talking about in the States, let's turn to Europe, where the political and economic ground is shaking, and the tremors are getting stronger. The European Commission has just dropped a bombshell, proposing that member states slap sanctions on Israel. We're talking about revoking trade privileges over the military operation in the Gaza sector and the Israeli government's policies regarding the West Bank. The head of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, announced this herself on social media, making it impossible to ignore. But hold on, this doesn't mean it's a done deal, not by a long shot. For this to pass, it needs a qualified majority vote from the member states, and right now that support simply isn't there. So it's a proposal that's loud on rhetoric, but, for now, short on teeth. What is going on here? Is this a genuine policy shift or a calculated political maneuver? Meanwhile, the Commission is also apparently getting ready to unveil a 19th, yes, you heard that right, a 19th package of sanctions against Russia. At this point, it's just background noise. They haven't even decided if they'll announce it publicly or just quietly slide it over to the member states for discussion. Everyone knows this package will change absolutely nothing. It's pure political theater. And speaking of theater, Donald Trump has thrown another idea into the ring, suggesting the EU should impose 100% tariffs on all goods from India and China. The European Commission's response? A hard pass. Nobody in their right mind in Brussels is going to pick that fight. They know that taking on China and India directly would be economic self-harm on a massive scale. But if you want to see a real crisis brewing, look no further than France. Today, hundreds of thousands of French citizens are on the streets. They are protesting the government's brutal austerity measures. We're talking about the 8 largest trade unions in the country calling for a nationwide mobilization, and the people have answered the call. The transportation sector has been hit the hardest, with movement in and around Paris ground to a near standstill. But it's not just about transport. The unrest has spread to schools. The teachers' union is reporting that educators are furious over terrible working conditions, stagnant, low wages, and what they see as the deliberate dismantling of the public education system. You hear that? They feel the state is undermining its own schools. To keep a lid on the bubbling rage and prevent it from boiling over into full-blown riots, the government has called in reinforced police patrols, mobilizing up to 80,000 law enforcement officers. The police leadership is warning that hundreds, maybe even thousands, of aggressive left-wing activists are ready to join the protests, looking to provoke clashes and vandalism. So what we have in France right now is a perfect storm, a political crisis crashing head-on into an economic one, and there are absolutely no easy solutions in sight. These mass protests and strikes, as powerful as they are, won't solve the underlying problems. In fact, this is just the beginning. The crises are only going to get deeper from here. Stay with us, because this story is far from over. And if you're finding this analysis valuable, take a moment to hit the like button and subscribe. It really helps the channel reach more people who need to hear this. And in the middle of all this French turmoil, there's a bizarre side story that you almost can't make up. President Emmanuel Macron is apparently preparing to submit photographic and scientific evidence to an American court to prove that his wife, Brigitte, is a woman. Their lawyer announced this, explaining these documents are for a defamation lawsuit the Macrons have filed against a right-wing American activist, Candace Owens, who has been pushing a baseless claim that Brigitte Macron was born male. The lawyer stated that these allegations have been incredibly upsetting and, quote, distracting for the president. Distracting from what exactly, they didn't say. You have a country in economic and social upheaval, and the president's office is busy fighting conspiracy theories about the first lady's gender. The optics are just staggering. Let's shift gears to Germany, where they're facing a different kind of crisis, a fuel crisis, at the country's largest airport in Hamburg. You heard me correctly. Due to a disruption in kerosene supplies, planes in Hamburg won't be able to refuel until at least Tuesday. The problem started with a failure at the Heide refinery, and here's the kicker: there's no backup supply system. None. In aviation circles, they're already joking about Cuban conditions, but for passengers, this is no laughing matter. We're looking at potential delays, rescheduled flights, and outright cancellations. Long-haul flights are especially at risk because not all airports along their routes can handle refueling. Airlines are now considering adding intermediate stops, which means even more delays. Lufthansa, a company we all know, says it will manage by refueling its planes in Frankfurt and Munich to keep its schedule, but for other, smaller carriers, the situation could be far more dire. The German Airports Association is already calling for a complete overhaul of the fuel supply system to prevent this from ever happening again. And while one part of Germany is running on empty, another is gearing up for a massive party. In the wonderful city of Munich, the capital of Bavaria, preparations are in full swing for Oktoberfest 2025. Organizers expect more than 6 million people to attend the grand event. This year, a liter of the famous beer will set you back between 14.5 and 15.5 euros. A bottle of water, around 11 euros. And if you're feeling particularly hungry, the most expensive dish on the menu is a steak for a whopping 229 euros. But behind the festivities, there's a serious debate bubbling up again in Germany, the idea of introducing a fee for visiting a doctor. The reason is a massive deficit in the budgets of public health insurance funds, estimated to be around 4 billion euros this year. Chancellor Friedrich Merz has already declared in the Bundestag that the healthcare and care systems need a fundamental restructuring to ensure money is spent more efficiently and actually helps those who truly need it. An economist specializing in healthcare has proposed a concrete step, charging 15 euros for every doctor's visit. The idea is to save the healthcare system and reduce the number of unnecessary appointments. They're also suggesting compensation for socially vulnerable patients. Alongside this, there's a major push for accelerated digitalization of medicine, the widespread implementation of electronic patient records, and the expansion of telemedicine, which is essentially providing medical care remotely using modern communication technologies. This is a huge shift, and it's happening right now. And speaking of big shifts, a massive deal just went down in Germany's retail electronics sector. One of the largest Chinese e-commerce giants has bought out C Economy, the parent company of the well-known German electronics hypermarket chains MediaMarkt and Saturn. The deal is valued at 2,230 million euros. So, while some media outlets are busy pushing narratives about China facing economic difficulties, the reality on the ground tells a very different story. China is expanding, and it's doing so aggressively. You can see China's ambition everywhere. They are about to launch the world's longest direct flight from Shanghai to Buenos Aires. The route will cover nearly 19,700 kilometers, with a flight time of up to 29 hours. Think about that. While Europe is dealing with internal squabbles and fuel shortages, China is literally connecting opposite sides of the globe. Now let's look at Poland, which after the Zapad 2025 military exercises has decided to keep its border with Belarus closed indefinitely. This is huge, because that border crossing was the main artery for 90% of all rail freight between the European Union and China. Closing it is a major blow to EU-China trade. A prolonged closure could force trade routes to be rerouted through Kazakhstan, the Caspian or Black Sea regions, or shift south through southern Europe and Turkey. The government in Warsaw is justifying the decision by citing security concerns for Polish citizens. They promise to reopen the border as soon as it's deemed completely safe. But when will that be? They're not saying. The Polish border guard reported just last night that they detected increased activity from Belarusian and Russian drones attempting to violate Polish airspace. So there were attempts to breach their territory. We're watching this situation very closely to see what happens next. This isn't just a border dispute, it's a geopolitical chess move with massive economic consequences. And as we see these old world powers struggle, new and bizarre ideas are emerging elsewhere. For example, in Japan, there's a movement to appoint an artificial intelligence as the leader of a political party. No, you didn't mishear that. A new party has emerged in Japan called the Road to Rebirth, founded by the former mayor of a small town, and their central idea is to let an AI run their politics. How exactly this will work is still unclear, but it is, and I want you to note this, the very first instance of its kind in Japanese politics. And this isn't an isolated event. In Albania, the government has already showcased the first address from a virtual minister created by artificial intelligence. This was the brainchild of the current Prime Minister, Edi Rama. He explained that this AI-powered minister will serve as a digital assistant to the government with the goal of reducing corruption, nepotism, and conflicts of interest in public procurement processes. Meanwhile, back in the world of human error, passengers on a flight from Paris to Corsica were forced to circle the island because the air traffic controller on the ground had fallen asleep during his shift. Yes, he fell asleep. It was only thanks to the airport's fire department that they were able to wake him up. Once the controller was awake, the flight landed safely. It's a wild world, isn't it? We have AI politicians on one side and sleeping air traffic controllers on the other. It really tells you a lot about the moment we're living in. I want to hear what you think about all this. Drop your opinions in the comments below. And before you go, please hit that like button, subscribe, and if you can, consider becoming a channel sponsor. Your support is what allows me to bring you the truth, unfiltered and independent. I wish you a peaceful sky, and I'll be back tomorrow. Believe me, there's always more to share. All the best.